So, in my last video, I was talking about the sin of presumptuousness by Christian nations against Jehovah, our Father in heaven, and against Yehoshua, the Messiah. Now, I want to continue a little bit with the presumptuousness against Israel by by Christian nations against Israel. And I'm going to first go ahead and go to get my screen share going up here real quick. And we'll go straight to debka.com. Hezbollah plans Hamas-style mob violence against IDF troops from the Lebanese border. Because as it appears, with Israel discovering the three tunnels that Hezbollah was digging in under Israel, Hezbollah sees that the Hamas-style mob violence template has worked for Hamas, so they're planning on doing the same thing. On Monday, December the 1st, Hezbollah activists began organizing groups of demonstrators in the Shiite villages of South Lebanon for mob assaults from behind the Lebanese border on the IDF teams excavating tunnels. They plan on taking a leaf from the violent disturbances Hamas and Islamic Jihad staged against Israeli troops from the Gaza border for months. Hezbollah strategists estimate that thousands of Shiite men, women, and children can be mobilized to harass the Israeli soldiers unearthing its tunnels. By turning up at different points, they would seriously hamper the Israeli operation. Since the IDF keeps to the Israeli side of the Lebanese border, these groups would be at first to be ordered to stay at least 20 meters from the soldiers' excavation sites. Our exclusive sources add that Hezbollah obtained a Lebanese army guarantee to secure the Shiite riots. That means to get them set up. Preparations appear to be in progress for the first outbreak to occur around the village of Mais El Jabal in the Marj Ayon district opposite Israeli Zarit. This patch was chosen as the starting point for the crowd assault on Israeli troops because there is no fence or wall blocking access between Lebanon and Israel. This first pilot demonstration will be staged to test results and gauge Israel's response. If the stratagem works for Hezbollah, it will be expanded to other parts of the border. A close watch is kept on the Gaza Strip in case the Palestinian terrorists Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which are closely aligned with Hezbollah, decide to go back to their former full-scale rampages against Israeli troops as the second front. In the last few weeks, they were persuaded to slacken the violence by the intake of Qatari dollars. Now, I suspect, folks, that that once they start this using Hamas and Islamic Jihad template of Gaza, that this will also happen in Judea and Samaria as well, creating a third front from Jordan. That is what I suspect. Now, we have a problem, folks. We have a very, very big problem. As you know, the whole world hates Israel and is working against Israel, and you would have thought that the United States, after what Hezbollah has done to the United States, I believe it was back in 1988 or 1989, was it somewhere in there? Not to mention what they did to my own schoolmate. I'm going to pull this up here for a second. Does anybody remember this young man? Well, I sure do. I remember him very well. He went to the same school as I did. In fact, Although he was up one grade level higher than I was at the time. I was in ninth grade and he was in 10th. In band class, we were in the same section. So I had a chance to talk to him. And I knew him for a brief period of time. I would say less than a year. Hezbollah murdered him on a plane, TWA Flight A47, on June 14th, 1985. Steedham was returned from an assignment in Nia Makri, Greece, aboard TWA Flight 847 when it was hijacked by members of the Lebanese pro-Iranian organization Hezbollah. The hijackers held 39 people hostages for 17 days, demanding the release of 766 Lebanese and Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. When their demands were not met, Steedham, as a member of the U.S. military, was targeted, beaten, and tortured. Finally, the hijackers shot him in the temple and dumped his body on the tarmac at Beirut airport. One of the hijackers, Muhammad Ali Hamadi, was arrested 2 years later in Frankfurt, Germany. He was tried and convicted of Steedham's murder and sentenced to life in prison, but was released in 2005 after serving 19 years. Did the United States go after him? Nope. 3 others, Imad Migunya, Hassan Is al-Din, and Ali Atwa, were eventually indicted for their involvement in the incident. In 2002, they were added to the FBI's most wanted list. On February 13, 2008, Imad Mugnia was killed in an explosion in Damascus, Syria. Steedham was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart and Bronze Star. He is buried in Arlington National Cemetery, Section 59, grave 430. Even shows the coordinates near other American victims of international terrorism. On August 24, 2010, in Yokozuka, Japan, on board the ship named after him, the USS Steedham, Steedham was made honorary Master Chief Constructionman by order of the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. His brother Kenneth accepted the certificate and decorations on behalf of Steedham's family. Now, folks, even though I briefly knew this young man and went to school with him, and like I said, only briefly knew him, the day that he was shot, I was pissed off. I was angry. And I thought to myself, I will never forgive Hezbollah for what they done to him. But it seems that the United States government has forgotten Robert Dean Steedham. It seems that they have forgotten about the hundreds of Marines that were killed in barracks by a terrorist, a Hezbollah terrorist, back in, I think it was in the 80s. Here's what I mean. On the Jewish News Syndicate by Shoshana Bryan, How America Helps Hezbollah. And this was just posted this morning. And as I was reading this, I got angry again. Because if this is the way that the United States treats Israel, if this is the way that the United States treats its citizens, then the United States government, then how can the United States government be a friend of anyone at all? A friend of the innocent, I should say. If they're going to be by default the friend of murderers. The U.S. government has provided military training and weapons plus $1.5 billion in aid to the government of Lebanon since 2006. You know, the end of the war Hezbollah instigated against Israel. This right here by itself is unforgivable. the theft of U.S. taxpayer dollars, aiding a government, the government of Lebanon, who operates at the behest of Hezbollah. I think that the United States taxpayers need to demand that money back from these legislators from their own personal bank accounts if necessary. The terror organization Hezbollah has built tunnels from Lebanese territory into northern Israel. The intention was infiltration. It turns out, however, that the IDF intelligence have been tracking them and last week entered southern Lebanon to destroy them. You can watch the video of a Hezbollah member actually finding the camera in a tunnel before it blows up. The Israeli Operation Northern Shield, will likely not cause a major cross-border war because Iran is not prepared to lose the assets it put there to the Israeli Air Force. What appears less understood is how the United States, by its financial and training support of the government of Lebanon and the Lebanese armed forces, is providing resources that allows Hezbollah to pursue its deadly machinations on the border. Not deliberately, of course, and not directly. Will somebody please tell me what the difference is? I mean, is it possible that I, a backwoods country boy with marginal intellectual qualities, understand that there really is no difference between deliberately or not deliberately and indirectly or directly? Isn't it in U.S. law in most states that if, say, 5 or 6 members of a gang that goes, let's say, and commits an act of robbery together, but one of them shoots and kills a victim, that they all are, upon being found guilty, in other words, they all are going to be charged for murder, the same as the man who fired the murder weapon. Isn't that enshrined in American law? Well, then the U.S. government must be judged by their own law. So where this becomes hazy is when both the United States and Russia and the permanent members of the UN Security Council try to make a distinction between Hezbollah, the terror organization, and Hezbollah, the government of Lebanon. The Russian spokesperson said, "We hope no actions taken will be in conflict with UN Security Council Resolution 1701. Well, I find that to be interesting. After all, wasn't it Hezbollah who violated Security Council Resolution 1701 to begin with? Isn't it already violated? But see, it's okay if Hezbollah violates it, but it's not okay if Israel, upon defending itself from the violation, has to violate that resolution itself. And Moscow hopes the UN interim force in Lebanon would fulfill its monitoring mission and will not allow any violations. That last bit was public window dressing. Every inch of southern Lebanon is a well-known violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701's 2006 demand that UNIFIL ensure establishment between the UN demarcated blue line and the Litani River, an area free of any armed personnel, assets, and weapons other than those of the government of Lebanon and of UNIFIL deployed in the area. Disarmament in all armed groups in Lebanon, so that there will be no weapons or authority in Lebanon other than that of Lebanon state. Hezbollah's 100,000 plus rockets and missiles in southern Lebanon would make a mockery of the resolution, except that the Lebanese state, separate from Hezbollah, is a fiction. If Lebanon was a person, it would be diagnosed with multiple personality disorder. Christian, Shiite Muslim, Sunni Muslim, Druze areas and varying militias with different goals and alliances. But Lebanon is a sort of functional parliamentary democracy, which means for purposes of discussion, the government is responsible for what happens within its borders. Today, the government is led by Hezbollah. In the parliament, Hezbollah and the Shiite parties aligned with it holds more than half the seats, and the Christian party of Lebanon's president, Michel Aoun, is aligned with Hezbollah as well. There is no separation between the Lebanese state and Hezbollah, between the whiny little country that bemoans its inability to control events within its territory and the nasty little country from which Hezbollah terrorists massacre Syrian civilians, carrying out terror attacks in Bulgaria and elsewhere in Europe, laundering drug money in South America, train Hamas terrorists, and return home with impunity. Between the country that begs for American aid and the country that begs for Iranian aid to carry out different parts of its agenda. The United States has, for more than a decade, been responsive to the face Lebanon shows it, unaware, unconcerned, or unwilling to deal with the other face. The U.S. government has provided military training and weapons plus $1.5 billion in aid to the government of Lebanon since 2006 and the end of the war Hezbollah instigated against Israel. The goal was to encourage Beirut to abide by the terms of the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 and to allow the LAF to operate in the south on the border with Israel as a closer to neutral force. A Pentagon spokesperson told Reuters News Service in May the United States remains committed to supporting Lebanon's sovereignty, stability, security, and its state institutions to include the Lebanese armed forces as a professional, multi-confessional, and sole legitimate armed forces of the Lebanese state. She noted that the United States considers the Lebanese Air Force as the sole armed forces, as a sole legitimate defender of Lebanon's sovereignty. But in the 12 years since 2006 war, UNIFIL and LAF have failed to establish or defend Lebanese sovereignty separate from Hezbollah. The United States pays for the fiction that the Hezbollah government in Beirut will order the LAF to fight the Hezbollah army in the south, that the Lebanese right hand will chop off the Lebanese left hand. Israel has no territorial aspirations in Lebanon, but the administration's current policies help Hezbollah threaten it in a way that it can easily lead to more and bigger wars. Well, I want to thank you, Shoshana Bryan, for revealing this. And since the government of the country that I live in has turned its back on people like Robert Dean Steedham, who I knew briefly, and basically took a dump on the man's grave, literally pissing on the man's grave, by helping Lebanon help Hezbollah, then I have nothing to do with the United States government, and it has nothing to do with me. If they're going to sit here and turn its back on its citizens so that it can stab Israel in the back, then how is the government of the United States any better than the government of Russia? And so while all this is going on, today an IDF delegation flies to Moscow Tuesday. Well, this is not the one that I was looking for. There was a whole large topic here. What happened to it? It was a good one too. But my point here is this. I have no allegiance to the United States of America. My home country is Israel. My city is the coming New Jerusalem, not Washington, D.C., not Rome, not Salt Lake City, not London, not Moscow. I I honestly wish that I was allowed to leave this country, the United States of America, and go to live in Israel, because I do not want to have any part of any country that takes taxpayers' dollars and pays billions and billions of dollars to nations who host terrorists. It is unacceptable, it is inexcusable, and it's also unforgivable.